Hello there, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about Murnau's Nosferatu. So, there's not going to be a comparison. I'm not going to compare it to the Herzog version. I'll give the Herzog version when I'm doing my Herzog season. But this is just the Murnau Nosferatu. I think both films deserve their own video, to be honest. They're both very interesting films, and I just think doing a comparison thing really isn't sufficient. I think you need to do both on their own merits, really. Because Herzog did a remake, but it's very much a Herzog film in lots of ways, and feels very different. It's longer. It's got its own soul to it. It's got its own way of. It takes a general idea, but does its own thing with it. Extends certain things, ignores other things. It's just like it's a different person's version of that film. So I like both films, but I probably prefer the original. To be honest, even though I really like the Herzog version. The Herzog version was controversial for a while because it was like, how dare you remake Nosferatu, but it's such a very good remake. Now, the Murnau's are one of my favourites from that period overall. I mean, there's two guys in the 20s Germany that I really adore, which is Murnau and Fritz Lang. They're two of my favourite directors. I mean, Lubitsch came out of that, then moved to Hollywood pretty quick. There's other good directors, but those two were the ones I really adored. Those are the ones that really got my imagination flowing. And to me, they're the masters of this period, and of course, Murnau died early while Lang went on until the late 50s and did a variety of films. Some good, some not so good, but they all had a Lang taint to them. They all felt like a Lang film because there's a pessimism to Lang that was always there. Murnau is much more of a director of actors. He liked actors more than Lang, I think, did. He also liked atmosphere more. He loved the cinematic flavour of filmmaking, the fact it's a trick on the audience, but also trying to make the trick feel moving and realistic. And it's like he never looked down on the melodramatic side of filmmaking. He just he could do Faust, but he could do Sunrise. Sunrise is a melodrama, but it's just turned into art. Like, he can understand it, why people were into the melodramatic storylines and actually could infuse them with meaning. And he could take fantasy and not feel like it was like someone looking down on it. He was like, okay, what's here in this? What's the emotional core to this fantastical situation? And that's what we're going to do, rather than just doing what we do nowadays. And fantasy becomes make-believe, and I wish this could happen, I wish that could happen, or I wish characters could be like this. And it kind of ignores the fact that fantasy should be like a metaphor for what's going on in humanity, rather than I wish, really. That's what fantasy should be. Fantasy should be a reflection of what's going on, But a lot of times nowadays it's not. It just becomes something else, something that's escape, really, rather than something that's an extension of reality and showing how certain things become metaphors for something that's a real life experience. And that's something we've lost a lot in filmmaking. It's something why a lot of films just feel motion distance to you, because they're doing a lot of what if and all these different scenarios. This happens, that happens, and it's like there's no emotional context to a lot of this, and that's why you're not feeling connected. So Murnau knew how to ground his films, even when fantastical, into something that approached the emotions of life, even if it wasn't directly the reality of life. So his adaptation of Faust is wonderfully imaginative, and it works beautifully. I did a small video when it first started on my channel, but I'm going to go back and rewatch and do a bigger video on Faust. The Last Laugh is a wonderful film about a guy whose life has collapsed, and there's a great fantasy sequence in it. And even when he was forced to have endings he wasn't keen on, Murnau could actually create something that feels emotionally tied to the reality, so it didn't feel like a total cop out. A great gift for that, even though just working in the film industry, found ways to take a compromised situation and make it uniquely his, which is quite a gift. So, I mean, most Murnau films are worth watching repeatedly. I mean, there's Taboo, there's Tartuffe, there's Sunrise, amazing, Faust, amazing. But we are going to talk about Nosferatu. Nosferatu was his Dracula adaptation that was unofficial. Like, it was the film that was sued, and every copy was meant to be burnt because it took the story of Dracula, which was still on copyright, and because it's filmed in Germany, they thought they could get around the copyright laws because they changed the name of all the characters, and it gutted so much of this book. There's so much of this book that's not in this film. They just took the basics and then changed it all into what they wanted, and he did something that's more beautiful than any like direct adaptation could be. I mean, one of the things I did watch over this weekend, as well as Nosferatu, was the original Dracula, Bela Lugosi, Todd Browning film that was made 10 years later. And it's actually quite good. I mean, it's an enjoyable film. I much prefer the Hammer version, as a film. And I much prefer Nosferatu as a film, because I think they're much more imaginative with their take on the vampire and the way it fits in their world. I think they both have more imaginative takes on it. But the Dracula one we watched in projector, you can sense of why it was so big at the time, because the first 20 minutes does have this sense of doom and gloom, and it is a very theatrical film with performances that are scenery chewing to the max. I mean, essentially, Lugosi, Dwight Fry, who plays Renfield, and Edward Van Sloan, who plays Van Helsing, are all trying to outdo each other who can be the most overblown performance. I mean, later on, Van Sloan actually said to someone, basically, he assumed the film would now be unwatchable for how overblown the performances were and how slow it was. So he might not have had a very good memory of the experience or an appreciation for his own work, because the performances there are enjoyably ripe and over the top. And, I have an affection for them. The funny thing is, Lugosi is tuned to me sometimes. But compared to Von Sloan and Dwight Fry, he's quite restrained. Except when he's doing a thing against the crucifix. That's the worst part of his performance. But the other two are just... It's almost like, I think Todd Browning liked a theatrical style. He came from silent films. He liked a theatrical embrace of performance. And so basically, the second half of the movie, you're basically Van Helsing and Renfield both trying to outdo each other for the most theatrical. And God help you when you put those two in a scene together. They're really trying to outdo each other in a wonderful way. It adds this weird atmosphere and weirdness to it. I'm not talking about that film, but it is like a weird thing where you see this version of it and they take it, but it's very much like a black and white morality in that film. Is like Dracula's evil, he comes in, he's obviously evil bad guy, he's the theatrical human face of evil, and you've got the innocents who are being corrupted by Dracula, and it's enjoyable, but it's like the supernatural elements kind of work because it's so overblown. So Browning seems to enjoy doing all the atmosphere, and so does the DP Karl Freund, who's a German, who loved all that stuff. But and there are, I mean, the leading lady's quite good. She's a bit strange, and she actually has it was an actress who had a tragic life after it because she just had a drinking problem. So there are good elements there, but actually I much prefer the Spanish Dracula, which came out just after it, that's shot at the same time, in the same sets, but a much more imaginative view of the camera moves and things. And because it was set in, it was all a Spanish cast, the religious element became much more interesting and weird. But back to Nosferatu. So that's what Hollywood did to it. Hollywood took the Dracula thing and played it straight. Ultimately, it's like a compressed version of the book. It's like Dracula bad, these Victorians good, and Van Helsing's going to save the day. In Nosferatu, none of that is there. Nosferatu basically it's almost like Dracula is this rat-like creature in a world of magical realism up in this castle away from society, and then he starts to slowly infect the rest of the world with his corruption. But it's the corruption of like an imaginative creature that, is tied to the animal world, but is also tied to the supernatural world. And it feels like an extension of our world, because what Murnau does early is he grounds us in the real world. It's not like Caligari, which is a lot of sets. This one, no, I mean, he shoots in towns, he shoots in... it shows like this hacker character going from civilization to the outskirts of civilization to Dracula, and it shows it through landscapes. And you get a sense of, even though Dracula's apart from the world, or Nosferatu's apart from the world, he's still part of the world. This is like the dark recesses of people's imagination tied to nature, and it's just this malignant thing that's eventually going to come out and get everybody. It's not like anyone deserves it or anything. It's not like anyone's pure until the ending. It's like everyone has been kind of slowly going through their life and slowly they're basically having lives that are difficult, and you've got all the problems of life in this town. So basically it's about a guy who is sent by his boss to go and go to see the Nosferatu character, the Count Orloff, and get him to sign these things so that he can come to civilization. So this guy has obviously sold out the human race already. He knows what he's sending the young man to do. The character's called Hooter, or Huttr, but it's really Harker. And they could have tried a little bit more to hide that name. So, there is already a corruption, a desire for nature to come and engulf civilization. It feels a case of civilization versus nature. Like, not the Nosferatu character is like the darker side of nature that's been suppressed, coming back and to really get a grip on civilization, so you're not as great as you think you are. And the whole thing, the film really is that kind of sense of, it's not evil versus good, it's nature versus the repressed. And all this, because I watched it on the projector, and I've seen it before projected, this is something you don't get as much when you watch it just on TV, because you need this is a big screen film. Murnau does films that are big screen experiences. You lose a lot when you're watching it on TV. You just do. And you need that sense of the big screen to see the little details throughout the film, in sense of where everything connects to everything else. So basically the story becomes like this guy going from civilization back into nature, and he has to go to this castle to get these deeds signed, which is, you've seen in every Dracula film. But in this one, he's arrogant. He thinks he knows it all because he's part of civilization. He's it's always a sound film. The acting by the lead actor is a bit over the top. Like we said, it's over the top. It's silent film acting at its most. Like, everyone else in the film is a much quieter compared to this guy. Even the over the top guy who sent him there, who's really made up to look really weird, isn't as big as this guy. But it works in the film because he's the guy, especially the big screen. I think in the small screen it probably seems a bit too big. In the big screen it feels much more like expression of this arrogance of civilization. Like, we can go back here to the country and we are masters and we are, you know, we know what's going on in the real world. And they don't. So it's about this guy learning how little he knows. But that would be a Hollywood film version. And here it actually becomes through the experience. It's not about articulating, it's all about just watching him going through these landscapes, through these experiences, and slowly realising how little he knows, how much of the natural world he doesn't understand. So it's not about like, oh no, this is evil. It's like, he gets warned, do not go to this castle, and he has to go because it's his job. He has to walk all the way up to the castle from the inn. He's warned, but it's not like we see the Lugosi Dracula. It's not like they're really overdoing it as if it's doom. Why would he go there after all this doomsday? And this is much more like, yeah, these villagers seem a bit odd, but it's just villagers. And of course they're right. And slowly it crosses over this landscape, this bridge that goes from the real world to the fantastical world where it's a world of darkness, a world of Count Orloff, of Nosferatu. And you just get a sense of the world. The rules are different, where the landscape become negative. The carriages that come from go really fast because everything's sped up. It's just a world where the natural rules do not work, and it's a world where the Nosferatu is this creature, this old creature. There's nothing sexual about it. It's this old rat-like creature that's living on blood, whatever blood he can get. It's not a great existence, but he's almost the spread of the disease. He's the personification of disease, and been lived too long. Like he's the aberration of the natural world. This is the natural world on the natural world. He's the aberration that's going to spread like a plague, literally. So it's something that adds the fusion very well worked out, but just the going from, because of all the travelling through like proper countryside, which you don't get in a lot of these versions of the films. You do get a sense of going from the real world to something that's not quite that. But it's not quite, it's evil but not quite. It's just like, it's a different view of the world. And like the Nosferatu character just sees him as a victim of him. He doesn't really care that much. It's just like he wants to use him for his own good. But he doesn't really care about him. There's nothing personal about it. It's just like you're the poor bugger who has to come here and give me some blood and then I'm on my way. I'll leave you here. So the first section is wonderful. It's very strange. It's best to see it with the proper intertitles and the proper because like Murnau shot, like some colours were blue tinted, some colours were orange tinted, so you get a sense of night and day and travelling. But you see in black and white, some of the transitions seem a bit more confusing. But you see the tint, it makes a lot more sense just watching it. So it's a much greater experience. You have the really creepy bit where, so the first third of this film is just setting up this world and him going to the castle and him entering this world landscape of, so it basically goes from the real world to German Expressionism, and it's expressionism of all the unease going under the surface of humanity. Then this next section is basically this diseased creature leaving his castle, entering the natural world and starting to affect it, and he's down this river where these people get him down this river to his boat. He's always in the coffins, and as the boat goes overseas to civilization, this becomes a much bigger sequence than you get in most of the films, where this is a whole sequence where you're seeing the ship getting slowly haunted by Nosferatu, this rat-like creature, this horrible creature that's just a human disease. It's just a disease in humanity. And you get a sense from this one section that humanity is doomed dealing with this creature. There's no way to avoid it. And then when it finally, amazing shot where the ship just floats through the water into the port, and it's just doom. Doom is coming to this town. There's no escape. And so what this film really has the sense of clarity, because it's only got an hour and a half to tell a story, so it's basically 3 acts, and Murnau clarifies all the imagery and what its themes are very simply, so you can understand it, so you go from A to B to C to D. Without it being obvious, it's a case of, okay, what are the main points, and how do I, after that point, once I work out what the main points of the story are, how do I make them more complicated without making them confusing? So you understand where the strong moments have to come, then where the more subtle moments below have to come. Like there's points where Nosferatu's carrying his coffin through the town, and found in darkness, and it's a very abandoned town, as he's about to bring the plague to this town. People are going to die of the plague. But him just walking through the town is almost like the personification of the plague arriving. And it's just a simple image, but it really works. It works so much better than a lot of the sucking scenes of any vampire movie. This is much more a sense of, this is the end for everybody. This is a creature that should have been just isolated from the world, and now he's come out to the world, and it's doom and gloom. The final third is basically the Hooter Harker character coming home because he escaped from the castle, and he's coming home to try and warn everybody. By the time he gets home, it's too late. The plague has come. People are locked in their homes. They're blaming the guy who sent them there because he's gone mad, and try to chase him through the town in a terrific sequence. But it's all a sense of everybody's panicking because they don't know what to do. It's like the natural world, fear of the plague, has come to this middle class civilization, and it's utterly rotted through all the assumptions. There's a Van Helsing character he's okay, but he's kind of he comes in after the fact. He doesn't come in like Van Helsing, who knows everything and can stop it. It's not like, this is a problem and I'm feeling way behind and everything. It's that kind of feeling, like the much more realistic take on what happened during the disaster, where you know from just experience from COVID is like all the supposed experts don't know as much as they like to let you think they know. They're always catching up, because when a disaster comes, you're always going to be behind it. And that sense where people are panicking, making judgment calls and trying to lynch people because they're scared. This sense of they're going through the town, you're seeing these marks of plague and door after door, and people are dying, and no one knows how to handle it. And eventually you get the kind of redemption where they kill the monster by the wife of Harker realises that the Nosferatu, from the diary of her husband, understands what Nosferatu is. Or from the little book he's got about vampires, telling all about vampires, she understands what it is, and that he's over there, that the Nosferatu is watching them. And from reading the book, she understands if someone pure of heart can make him forget about the rising sun, he can be killed with the sun. So that she sacrifices herself in one of the most iconic scenes in movie history. He comes up and it's a shadow rather than Nosferatu itself, and he starts sucking her blood, and then the cock crows, and he realises he stayed too late, and it's this wonderfully poetic feeling, because the whole film's been simple without being simplistic. It's like, it's had what I've said earlier, it has a sense of Murnau's worked to the imagery. Like, we've gone from realism to magical realism to the plague in the world to more insanity, and it just comes back suddenly to this one simple image and one simple sacrifice that kills the evil. And it just works. It's so simple. It's done so clearly that it just works. Everything you've seen before just builds to this, and it's the best version of how to kill a vampire. No one's ever topped this scene. No one's ever going to top this scene. This scene's wonderful. Even Herzog couldn't top this scene. He replayed it, but he couldn't top it the same way this is done, because just the vampire just is like this, and then suddenly the sun makes him dissolve into just this dust. It's almost like he was never there in the first place. It's just this personification of the natural world being taken apart by plague. He's just this version of it. So basically, the vampire is part of the problem, is not the full thing. It's like he's the instigator. And by killing it, someone's decided that they can move on. Of course, the woman dies, so she sacrificed herself for everybody. It just works beautifully, but it's a sense of, okay, people will recover, civilization will recover, but it has been bruised by this experience, and they won't be so cocky now about what they've learned and what they know. Like, there's things out there they don't understand. It's just a beautiful film. It's wonderfully done. Just the atmosphere of all the details just add up, and so many shots with Nosferatu like going through the ship, you know, as people are dying. Just this, how he's just a plague on anything that crosses his shadow is just wonderfully done. And the first scene where it's just this kind of rat-like creature who sees blood, and it's almost like any little bit of blood is what he needs. It's not like a seductive vampire. No, any bit of blood is his sustenance, really. He needs that. And he's as damned as anything else. I mean, there was talk that the character was anti-Semitic because he had a big nose. But he's meant to be a rat-like creature, so it feels much more like them trying to do something that would be inhuman. It doesn't mean if it had been made later on in the decade, you'd say okay, maybe, but this was well before the Nazism really was on the rise. This was just post-war confusion and in Germany. I think it's probably much more to do with them trying to make him as different from humanity as possible, because the nose is so much bigger than a human nose. So, but Nosferatu is wonderful. Nosferatu is just so good, and it is just so elemental. It's such an important part of film history that everyone should see it. It's one of those films, the more you watch, the better it gets, because you've got the basic beats of Dracula, but what they do with it and how emotional it can be. It's sort of like The Shining, where it's a film that works well in the first viewing, but it works really well with the fourth or fifth viewing, as you really get into the weeds of the film and really get into the little details of the film. And just the filmmaking where it intercuts between the natural world and images of like Van Helsing looking at these microscopic images and all these kind of animalistic images and things, and it just becomes a sense of the world that's evolving, is out of control, and nature's out of control, and no one's quite got a handle on themselves or handle on how they fit into the world, or how humanity and its civilization fits into the real world and the natural world. And it's a wonderful film about us within nature, us within our imagination, and the kind of dark things from the magical realistic world that infects the world and infects the need for sacrifice with this woman at the end. Because what she's doing could just be delusional. Doesn't matter, because the way it's been worked out, it feels very emotional, but it could also just be someone. You know, it's a wonderful film. There's so much wonderful stuff in this film, so I highly recommend it. You have to go see it. I mean, you should know to go see it anyway if you're a film fan, but if for some reason you've given it a miss, do not give it a miss. It's just such a good film. Okay, that's me for now. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back soon with another vampire film from that PS period. So, from another master of cinema. So, back soon.